You've been here before. Different person, different name, different face, same pattern. And at some point, probably in a quiet moment when you were alone, you asked yourself the question, why does this keep happening to me? Most psychology content focuses entirely on the narcissist, their behaviors, their damage, what they do to people. What very few people will say clearly is this: certain patterns, formed long before you ever met a narcissist, make you disproportionately visible to them. Not because you're flawed, not because you deserve it, because you fit a very specific profile that manipulative people are extraordinarily skilled at detecting. Today, we're going to look at that profile honestly. Before we go further, I want to be precise about something. I am not saying you are responsible for being mistreated. I am not saying you invited it or caused it. What I am saying is that understanding the patterns that made you a target is the single most powerful thing you can do to change who shows up in your life from this point on. This is not about blame, it's about clarity. And clarity is protection. Reason 1. Your nervous system was wired for inconsistency. Attachment theory, developed by psychiatrist John Bowlby, expanded by researcher Mary Ainsworth, identifies the patterns of emotional bonding we form in early childhood based on how consistent our caregivers were. If the primary person who raised you was warm sometimes and distant, critical, or unavailable other times, you likely developed what researchers call anxious attachment. And here's the part that matters. People with anxious attachment are neurologically primed to find intermittent affection more compelling than consistent affection. Think about what that means in practice. A consistently loving partner can actually feel flat, boring, even slightly suffocating, because your nervous system was calibrated in childhood for the chase, the uncertainty, the relief of earning love back after it was withdrawn. Narcissists, with their cycle of idealization and cold withdrawal, replicate that childhood dynamic almost exactly. You're not attracted to narcissists because something is broken in you. You're attracted to them because they feel familiar. Reason 2. Your empathy is your greatest strength, and manipulators know it. Research consistently shows that narcissists disproportionately target people who score high in empathy, people who are naturally attuned to others, who feel deeply, who instinctively try to understand another person's pain. And here's why. A highly empathetic person gives more benefit of the doubt. They work harder to understand difficult behavior rather than walking away from it. They're less likely to leave when they're hurting, because their empathy extends even to the person causing that hurt. The narcissist doesn't choose you despite your empathy. They choose you because of it. That sounds brutal. It is brutal. But understanding it changes how you protect yourself going forward. Reason 3. The wound that looks like a superpower. This is the reason most psychologists are careful about stating directly, because it requires talking about childhood in a way that can feel close to blame. But here it is. Many people who repeatedly attract narcissists grew up in an environment where love was conditional. You had to perform, achieve, be manageable, hold yourself together, manage the emotions of the adults around you before you were old enough to understand what you were doing. What that environment produced is an adult who is extraordinarily skilled at reading people's emotional states, at anticipating what someone needs before they say it, at managing tension in a room, at being whatever the situation requires. These are genuinely impressive capabilities. In many areas of life, they were a real advantage. But in a relationship with a narcissist, they are a perfect match. Because a narcissist needs someone who will adapt continuously, absorb emotional volatility without leaving, and center the narcissist's experience as the primary reality. And you learned how to do all of those things before you were old enough to question whether you should. Reason 4. They found you, not the other way around. Narcissists, especially those who are socially skilled, develop an almost uncanny ability to identify people who fit the profile. They scan for quiet insecurity beneath a confident surface, for people who are generous but secretly doubt their own worthiness of generosity, for people who are eager to be truly seen because that need is leverageable. They also notice social availability, someone new to an area, recently out of a relationship, slightly disconnected from their support network. Isolation makes dependency easier. You didn't find them. They found you. And they selected you because you matched something specific. Reason 5. After the first one, your nervous system learned the wrong lesson. After a narcissistic relationship, something shifts in how you recognize love. Your brain begins to associate the emotional intensity of that dynamic, the highs and lows, the anxiety and relief, the craving, with what love feels like. So when you meet someone new who is calm, consistent, and genuinely kind, they can feel wrong somehow. Flat. Unexciting. And when you meet someone who triggers that old familiar intensity, the chemistry feels undeniable. That's not chemistry. That's your nervous system recognizing a pattern it was conditioned to respond to. None of what I've described today is a life sentence. Attachment patterns change with awareness and deliberate practice. Empathy can be protected with boundaries rather than depleted by people who exploit it. The wounds that made you a target can become, once you understand them, the source of real insight and real strength. But none of that happens while the pattern stays hidden. It starts here, with exactly what you did today, sitting with an uncomfortable truth and choosing to let it inform you rather than define you. That version of you who kept showing up despite everything, they deserved better information. Now you have it. The next video on this goes deeper into trauma bonding, why you miss someone who hurt you, and the specific neuroscience behind why leaving is so hard. Subscribe now.